Hey everyone, welcome back to Knights of the Round Table. Always a pleasure having you on, Nancy.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Nancy. So, what are we going to talk about today? Today, it's about addiction.
Addiction.
And the crazy opioid crisis that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And you're a bit of an expert in this field. You've had to deal with this professionally for many years, right? Helping people.
I was a primary counselor at a hospital, drug and treatment program, Bethesda Drug and Alcohol. Primary counselor there, therapist. And that was my beginning in addictions. And my mentor was Kelly Rogan. She's just an icon.
I know Kelly.
Yeah, an icon of recovery in our city. Brilliant. And then I went to River City Correctional for almost a decade, where I worked with felons that were either addicts who had committed a felony in pursuit of their addiction, or actual drug dealers and traffickers. So I've had a lot of experience with addicts and alcoholics. In fact, the majority of my career has been dedicated to addiction.
It's an interesting time right now in that we're at the epicenter of it in Kentucky and Ohio, right? Mainly Kentucky, where there's a crisis, an opioid addiction crisis.
There are places in Kentucky where Walmarts are opening or are hiring, and they do drug screening, and everybody tests positive. They cannot even hire anybody because everybody tests positive. And we're not going to do tonight, we are not going to talk about how the opioid epidemic came about.
Painkillers.
Purdue Pharmaceuticals, and how the corporation, Big Pharma, did their own testing, their own research, and they knew 100% how addictive Percocet, Oxycontin, etc. was.
But someone's prescribing it. It's not Big Pharma.
They knew. And they came to doctors and clinics and with their product, their salespeople, and they said, "This is not addictive." They lied. They've
Are
been
you sure
sued
about that though?
100%.
How do we know it's not black market?
They've been sued in Canada.
Really?
Purdue has been sued, found guilty, had to pay $2 million. They have admitted that they lied. They flat out lied.
I didn't know that.
You did not know that. And they went to clinic, doctor, as they do and they lied.
But you would think, as a doctor, they got a duty of care. And if they're writing those prescriptions, knowing it's an opioid, knowing this is basically from the poppy plant, heroin-based drug, right? I don't know enough about it to talk about it intelligently.
Well,
I might be sounding really stupid right now, so I'll shut my mouth.
No. But the interesting thing is there are very wicked, evil, nefarious physicians who actually have pain clinics that are nothing more than money-making, and they're arrested all the time. Recently, I forget how many of them were in a raid. There were like 20 of them doing this.
There's always some dodgy people out there.
But these are so dodgy that you would make your millions on the back of addiction. Is like, to me, it's like the pimps who traffic kids. It's just sick. I mean, that it is sick. But this is not where I want to go tonight. Yeah. I mean, the other thing is, so we know that came from Big Pharma. Then we also know that cocaine came into the United States through the CIA.
I don't know.
Oh, well, back in the 80s, in Nicaragua, there was a war between the Sandinistas, who were socialists, and the Contras, who were rah-rah America. And it was a proxy war between Russia and the United States. Russia was for the Sandinistas. We were for the Contras. And the president of the United States decided that he was not going to fund the Contras anymore. And they were furious. And so they decided they would fund themselves by bringing cocaine into California.
Oh, I heard about that.
Yes, and selling it. And there have been congressional, Senate. There have been all kinds of investigations into this. But
I'm sure they were investigating it.
Right. But I mean, it is a known fact they did that in order to fund their war. And then the third trifecta of this horror is we know that the mafia had at some point brought heroin into their bag of tricks.
Oh, well, ever since we invaded Afghanistan, heroin production has increased.
Why are we still there? I mean, hello. We have no reason to be there other than the poppies. End of story. But in the beginning, the mafia said, and this also is history, not conjecture, but history, the mafia said, we're not going to bring it into the white neighborhoods.
Really?
Yes. Only...
Oh, they had cocaine already.
Only the black neighborhoods. Well, this is back in New York, in New Jersey. They're only going to bring the heroin to the African Americans, not to their own white people. So the whole background of
There's a lot
drugs,
of conspiracy theories, but some of it you believe this is historical fact.
No, I don't even... No, right. And it's not even that I believe it is historical fact. Yeah. But I don't want to do any of that now.
Okay.
I just want to say the drugs came in nefarious ways that always benefit the wealthy and the corporations. But I want to talk about addiction itself and the process of addiction. And what I would like to talk about is the weak-willed addict, the addict who steals, the addict who just can't say no. And we have these nefarious pejorative thoughts about addicts that are just not true. And it's a fascinating thing that some of the coolest, wisest, and most incredible people I know are addicts and alcoholics that are in recovery. They are so wise and so smart and just so magical. But what happened to them? How did these magical people turn into literally pathetic addicts doing behaviors that are just reprehensible to themselves and others? So we're going to go there.
All right.
Addiction is not something that weak people fall into because they're weak. It is
absolutely not
scientifically an organic brain disease. The brain of an addict processes their drug of choice different in their brain than you or I.
Can I ask a question about that?
You may.
So the way it's processed, so I know a lot of people that are addicted to all sorts of stuff. Some people are addicted to maybe fighting with someone so that they without realizing it, they're addicted to the adrenaline rush. Some people are addicted to the dopamine hits of checking their social media. Some people are addicted to exercise. Some people have healthy addictions in a way, right? But it's all similar in that they're getting some kind of neural response, right, that stimulates the let's just say a pattern of behavior or thought. So I don't know many people today that aren't addicted to something.
That is very true, but we are going to stick with addiction to, and that is totally true. We are going to stick with addiction to alcohol and drugs. Okay. When you look at an MRI, which they have, of someone having their drug of choice in their vein, and you look at their brain on the camera, you see this explosion. So if I'm a cocaine addict and they put cocaine in my vein, woo, it is an explosion. If you put cocaine in the vein of somebody who's not addicted, that's not their drug of choice, it's just bip. The same thing is true with weed. You put weed in, whoa! You put weed in a regular person, not so much.
Really?
Yeah. You can see it.
But doesn't it change your brain chemistry over time?
We'll get to that because that is very astute on your part. So and how this plays out in real life is you have a high school kids. They're sophomores in high school, and they got some beer from their older brothers or sisters.
Guilty.
And they're out in a field, and they get roaring drunk for the first time. And after they're roaring drunk, they're all throwing up. They're sick. And the next morning, the alcoholic child goes, "Oh my God, when can we do it again?" And all the other people are like, "Are you kidding me? I've never been so sick." Why? Because that alcoholic child, in their brain, the dopamine explosion felt so good. And I liken it, when I talk to the addicts in the prison, I liken it to when you ingest your drug of choice. If you're an addict and you have an organic brain disease, which means in a certain sense you're allergic to your drug of choice. And I use the word allergic in that your brain reacts differently to your drug of choice than someone who is not addicted to that drug. So someone who loves Percocet or pills, when they get that Percocet, it's like Pandora's box opens, and their brain, their serotonin, their dopamine, their neurotransmitters take them, like when Pandora opened the box, it takes them to a place that feels so good. Cocaine makes a cocaine addict feel so good. Those crack cocaine addicts, they will do anything. When I was at the prison, I had this awesome man that was just, he was a crack addict, but he was smart, funny, and his sister called me up, and she said, "How's my brother doing?" I said, "Oh my gosh, he's awesome." She goes, "Oh, he's conned you?" I said, "What do you mean conned me?" She goes, "He's horrible. He is not, who you're describing is not my brother." Let me tell you about my brother, Miss Simpson. She said, "Last Christmas, my brother calls me up and says, 'I'm in recovery. I'm doing so well. I want to come over for Christmas.'" And she goes, "No, you cannot come over for Christmas. I do not want to see you," because I had set a boundary, because he had stolen from me. He had stolen from my kids. He had done so many things. I set a boundary, and I did not want to see him. He comes over, knocks on my door. "It's Christmas. I want to see you and the kids." "No, go away." "It's Christmas. Let me in." You know what he did when I didn't let him in? He kicked out my front window, went under the tree, and took the PlayStation of my children. So that is who you're dealing with.
Whoa.
These, a heroin addict, a crack addict, a pill, they will go to any length to get their drug of choice, because once the brain has tasted it and they've lived in this Pandora's box, coming down and going back to reality is physically horrific if you're a heroin addict, but for the cocaine, you can't live a regular life. It's just too hard.
Intriguing.
Now, you have the old rat in the cage. You put the rat in a cage with cocaine.
I know this experiment.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you put the cocaine in there or heroin in there, and you put food in there, and they can have as much food, water, cocaine, heroin as they want. They will get high until they die.
Yep.
But interestingly enough, as you know, you can make experiments say anything you want. And that's an interesting one that we've all heard of. Somebody did another experiment a few years back, and into the cage where they had the drug of choice, the water, the food, they put exercise equipment, and they put a maze, and they put other things.
Playground. They made it like a little heaven. Yeah.
A rat playground. And the rats lived far longer because they had something to occupy them.
They weren't attracted to the cocaine anymore.
Well, they were, but not to the same degree.
Okay.
And what that tells us is how people in recovery, if they have support, if they have something to occupy them, they will do, like the rats, much better in their recovery.
There seems to be a connection that I'm not sure how true this is, but with a lot of addiction, people are lacking social connections.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. One, because their behavior, they behave themselves out of their social connect, out of their job, out of their school, out of their family, because they're so dysfunctional, and then they begin breaking the law, and then they begin going to jail, and then how can they even get a job? Right. So, yeah, very hard. Then the question becomes, how do they recover? Ever? How does anybody who is a late stage alcoholic or addict
love, compassion, understanding, and probably therapy and medicine, combination of many things?
And it's been my experience.
Just guess it.
Yeah, over 20 years of working with addicts and alcoholics, there is a dose of grace or magic. There is a dose of something happens, and I am not spiritual. I am not mystical. I am the opposite of woo. But I have seen...
You got a little bit of woo. I know you do.
I know you... I'm accused, maybe a little. And this is where I do have a little bit, because people who are lost, literally lost, they are just lost. It's like a door opens, and like the universe, magic, love, grace, invites them to walk through the door to recovery. And they can say no, but when they walk through the door and they begin their journey of recovery, and you ask them, like, what happened? Like, how did you? And they will, so many times they'll say, I don't know. Like, all of a sudden, it was my time.
Like, something happened.
A light bulb went off. All of a sudden, a door opened. All of a sudden, I didn't want to do it.
It's
whatever.
Like rock bottom. Is that what it's called?
It's not
hit rock bottom.
Well, they call it, your lowest bottom, but not everybody has the door open at their lowest bottom. People have that door open before they hit the lowest bottom sometimes. Yeah. They haven't lost their job. They haven't lost their family, but they know they're drinking every day, or they're taking the pills every day, and sometimes you don't have to. It's like I said, it's magic. Now, Carl Jung, who was at the time the most incredible psychologist on the face of the earth, had a very wealthy alcoholic come to him in Europe, and the alcoholic said, I think this was back in the 40s, he said, I can't go on. Like, I've lost everything. And they say, you're the best, Dr. Jung, you're the best psychologist on the face of the earth. Help me, please help me. And Carl Jung said, I have never been able, with all of my psychoanalytical Jungian genius, I have never been able to fix an alcoholic. I have never been able to help an alcoholic stop drinking. He said, and this gets me teary, he said, but I hear there are groups meeting in the United States of America where people are getting well and people are getting sober. And he was talking about AA. It's been my experience that there is no place on earth where more recovery has happened than at AANA. There is something about those rooms. They're dingy basements, they're church halls, there's stale coffee.
There's a community.
And magic, and magic. And
I believe it's through that community, through having a group of people with a common cause.
With a common cause.
Showing each other compassion, love, and friendship.
Yes.
Right.
One drunk talking to another drunk, one alcoholic talking to another alcoholic, and there is something in the synergy of that group, how it was set up. I can't even describe it, but the magic happens, and people, they say it works if you work it, and people who go to AA and work the program, do get sober.
So here's the thing that I've always wanted to know, and this could be a separate topic we can talk about another day. If you take away the religious or spiritual element out of AA, does it still have the same effect? A lot of people say it doesn't. And I would question that. But it has a spiritual religious element to it that kind of irks me a little bit, but it works.
Yeah, it works. But here let's talk about the spiritual element. The spiritual element is the higher power. And they say the higher power can be the room.
Okay, so
it can be the people.
It could be a pot plant. It could be a rock.
Yes.
It could be whatever you want.
And they say that. I mean, that is said at those meetings.
I didn't know that.
Yes, the higher power can be anything you make it.
Could be Elvis.
Yes, I do think it's Elvis.
Okay, it could be. Okay, so that makes a bit more sense.
Yeah, so
something greater than yourself.
Yes, so when we say it has a spiritual element, it's not Christian, it's not Buddhist, it's not what it is, a higher power that can be, and I would say many people, it is the group. The group is the higher power. But it could be your family. It's anything you want to make it, which does take the religiosity out of it. I would say almost totally.
Okay.
Almost totally. Yeah, and that is fair.
So what one of the greatest shrinks of our time couldn't do?
AA could.
AA could.
And if you are listening to our podcast and you know, like, you're drinking too much, you know you've had 2 DUIs now, you know you've started buying Percocet from your friends, you know your Xanax is not just for bedtime, but now all day, every day. You can just walk in to AA, and you can be, for AA, even though it's Alcoholics Anonymous, you can be addicted to Percocet or drugs, and you're welcome in AA. But you go to AA, your first time, your second time, that is your best shot at recovery. That is your best shot. And anybody can go. You just walk in and you're there. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. You just go and sit and sit and sit until the magic happens to you. One thing I want to say too, go back because I left this out. You're born an addict. You are born with a brain disease that is triggered by your drug of choice when you first take it. So when the alcoholic has his first alcohol, he can become an alcoholic with that first drink. A pillhead can become an addict with his first Percocet. There's another way that you can become an alcoholic or an addict, and that is you do not have a genetic predisposition to alcoholism, but you drink with your friends, you drink with your friends, you drink with your friends, and you can push your brain into the disease. You can become an alcoholic by drinking, and you can actually push your brain into the disease, although you were not born that way. And I left that out, but I just want to put that in.
Can you do that with almost anything, though, as well? Like, you can get addicted to all sorts of things.
All sorts of things.
We're very complex beings.
Mm-hmm. And back to your point, it is the brain has this explosion of dopamine and serotonin that feels so good that regular life pales. Now, back to your point, that can happen with a woman who loves to shop. It can happen with a man who sees pornography and he's just like, oh my God, he gets addicted to pornography. If your brain has this Pandora's box of wonderment, And it's so good. I guess you're lucky if that happens with exercise or that happens with reading awesome books or whatever. But whenever we enter this place that with a person, you see this girl and you just, your serotonin, you're just like, all you can do is think about, yes, we can become addicted to just about anything.
So what you're saying, though, is, Nancy, once you open Pandora's box, there is a way to close it, right? Mm-hmm. And that is through a community group like AA. Mm-hmm. So if it's alcohol, if it's a drug, you're recommending, in your professional opinion, to look for your nearest group and wait for the magic.
Yeah.
The magic will happen.
Overeaters Anonymous, Shoppers Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous. Is there one for hamburgers? I'm
thinking of changing my name to the Hamburglar. Legit Hamburglar.
You kind of look like a hamburger. You do. You do look a little. You're a cute
more
hamburger.
And more every day.
More and more every day. Yeah, you do look a little bit like a hamburger.
Hamburger and fries.
Yeah. So that is my podcast on addiction. And if you're out there and you're a little worried and things aren't feeling right, just go to a meeting.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.